Folks, it's noon. Let's get started. Actually a surprising amount of people here, so good on you for coming. They have an assignment due. That's always a weird strategy. I've done it multiple different ways where it's like the assignment's due that day. Sometimes people don't come. If the assignment's due, I made the mistake one time of having the assignment due right before class, and so literally nobody showed up for that class. So I guess midnight is far enough away that you're all feeling very confident, which is good. Questions on homework one? Yes.
So I subscribed to the mailing list before we actually.
Yes, we've marked everything. So if there's any problems, we will contact you.
Okay, cool. So I just said the first part was.
Yep.
With the ASU, right? I didn't subscribe to the ASU.
We can usually find out by your ASU ID that you used. Okay. It's usually very clear. So if there's any doubt, we will contact you.
Thank you for printing the first output.
Oh, is that helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I should have done that. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but yeah, for the other ones, it's very. I mean, the output is literally exactly basically what the input is. So you can derive the test cases almost exactly from the input. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Yeah.
I should have posted about it on the mailing list, but I had trouble with my policy critique. Apparently, somehow got a Unicode character in it that I couldn't see.
Yes.
And even though I was just using gedit, the submission server was denying it.
Yes.
And so I had to use some online service to strip those out.
Yes.
And
Be careful.
Kind of frustrating.
Another thing that I know comes up is, especially if you try to do this in Word, and it auto does your, instead of a single ASCII quote character, it turns it into a smart curved quote, and same with double quotes. And so if you try to copy paste that into a text file, you will end up with problems. So yeah, you're learning awesome things about filing coding.
Oh,
It's a side benefit.
It's a perk.
Yes. Yeah.
I discovered 4K monitors and VirtualBox don't get along.
Can you what?
I discovered 4K monitors and VirtualBox don't get along.
I can't hear you. What are you saying?
4K monitors and VirtualBox don't get along at all.
4,000? How many?
A 4K monitor?
The graphic.
Oh, on a monitor. Oh.
Yeah, literally drags Ubuntu down into like a snail's pace because it doesn't know how to do that.
Well, you know what the fix to that is, right? Just run a server Ubuntu image, so you SSH into it, you don't need a GUI.
Or increase video.
Or, I don't know, maybe post on the mailing list and somebody else maybe has an idea. So I think there is a way you can give the VM access to your graphics card, so it will be a lot faster and not do it in software. Maybe that's
I
what
looked up online, apparently they say that NVIDIA does not like passing through video cards through that way.
I can see that. Yeah, computers are complicated. Anything else? Yeah.
Do you have any advice for any of us who pass all except the Ciphertext?
Yes. Yeah, okay, so I was talking about this with somebody in office hours yesterday. So the way you should approach that is think like me, right? Pretend you're me, pretend you are making a secret, more difficult test case. And that should help guide you. It's not a crazy test case, so it's not like, I'm not breaking the laws of physics where there's not a person inside and outside of the house with the same name, right? So the same name is the same person, it's not doing anything like that. None of these tests, they're all valid inputs, so they're not anything that's going to be crazy input-wise. So, yeah, you probably need to think through. So if you think of it like, one thing you could do, right, is to think about it like an event, because there's all these different events that could happen, right? So you think about what combinations of events have you tried, and which ones have you not tried, or which ones would be tricky and actually make sense based on what the description says. So think. Right? That's. I think. Well, after probably by next Tuesday, I think it won't matter. So I can talk about what that test case was. I'm sure it'll be a thing. You'll be like, oh yeah, I'm doing it this way, and that means that this fails in this circumstance. So that I'm fine with. But. All right.
Well, that was probably the biggest hit of all, which doing this thing in this certain way, and that's why it failed. So you need to think about.
But that's what always happens. That's what you realize. This is literally every possible case. It's something that you did wrong. You either have an infinite loop or you're misread the policy or something, right? Like that's, yes. But if that helps, then I think that's awesome. I'm happy to have helped. All right.
We're going to send out a clarification. Did you send that out?
No? About what?
You said on the policy and the two written ones, you were going to just.
I mentioned it in class. That's good enough. It was more of a hint to the people who were here. It wasn't a clarification, it was a reiteration of what I already talked about. All right. And we break the ciphertext, the message says. You guys have homework to work on or something? What if I had given extra credit for doing this? Would one of you have tried to solve it? What if there's only a half point or a quarter point? Doesn't matter. Extra credit's extra credit. All right. Oh man. You had bragging rights. I told you to do it and nobody did it. So none of you can brag.
You're like
All right.
the only person that's tried, and there's nothing to brag about.
Trying is good. Okay, so this is where we left. So we left off with the Vigenère cipher. And we needed to, so to break this cipher, what was our first approach? What's the first thing we needed to do here?
Figure out the key length.
Figure out the key length. Why?
Well, if you know the period of repetitions, you can divide it into chunks of data that length, and then you take it column by column, and you can solve it the way you do the Cipher cipher.
Yeah, so we need to know the key length because we know that every character that's a modulo of the key length will be all encrypted with the same key, and therefore we can break it. We're kind of reducing the problem instead of the Caesar cipher where we only had one thing here where we can attack 6 different Caesar ciphers or 10 different Caesar ciphers at once depending on what the key length is. So we already saw the way we did this, and that's where we left off at the end, was to try to look for repetitions in the ciphertext. Because it is likely, especially with a long ciphertext, the reason why the ciphertext is repeating is because the same plaintext is being used by the same key, encrypted by the same key. So we saw that here, and so basically this tells us that it's either, usually it will tell us that this is some factor of 9 or a combination of the factors of 9. Which makes sense because this was 3. So what was the really long repetition we have in here, and what's the length? So it was the O, E, Q, O, O, G, 6. And what's the distance between that and the next repetition? $24? See if you're right. Okay. 30. Yeah. So you need to start from the
beginning to
beginning. Yeah, exactly. From one character to the other, exactly, right? Which makes sense because you're trying to figure out what's the distance there. So it includes the 6 characters of the one we just talked about. Cool. So we can do this for every single repetition in the ciphertext, right? And this tries to give us some idea. So what would we maybe try to start with? What are some strategies here? I think briefly mentioned on Tuesday that, hey, let's try to start with where the repeated letters are the longest, because that's the longer the letters are, the less likely it is to be due to random chance. But let's say we do that, we have a distance of 3, so now we think, well, it could be a factor of 3, or it could be maybe any of the multiplications of any of the factors of 3. So what do we actually try? Do we try all of them? I mean, we've narrowed it down kind of a lot, right? It could be 30, it could be 10, it could be 15, it could be 5, it could be 3, it could be 2, it could be 6, it could be dual combinations. I think so. So from all of those, what do we choose and why?
Would we choose we kind of touched on, I think at the end, the most, if we're limiting ourselves to 2, 3, or 5, try 5 first because it's the most restrictive?
So let's think about this. The reason why, our reasoning behind choosing this repetition was that in the ciphertext, the occurrence, assuming that a character of length 6 repeats itself, assuming that it's by random chance, that's highly less likely than 2 things repeating themselves. But what you're saying is kind of the question here is more, what's more likely of a key length? Is it 2, 3, or 5? Or one of the multiples here of 6 or 10 or 15 or 30, right? So I'd say maybe by that, I don't know that you could say necessarily, like how do you decide between 2 or 3, what the key length is likely to be? Just based on that information of the length of the key. Your hand up.
Yeah, I'd probably go with 3 just because it'd be easier to identify if if it's a multiple of 3 or 5. So I'm thinking just going with 3 first, since it's shorter, you maybe can find more meaningful 3-letter words.
What do you mean more meaningful 3-letter words?
Sorry, not meaningful, but you could find 3-letter words. There are more of them on average, and so you might get better combinations of, instead of randomness, just stuff that falls in. And you could search for 3-letter words pretty fast through the text.
But you still have to split the text into 3 different ciphertexts, right? And try to break each of those as a Caesar cipher. But you don't know whether breaking each of those as a Caesar cipher is correct, so how do you know to look for the 3-letter words?
Magic.
Magic? There's no magic. Magic doesn't exist. Sorry, shattering illusions. Yeah.
Anything sufficiently complicated so as not to be understood can be construed as magic.
Yeah. So how would you do this? Not magic.
Well, 2 and 3 occur roughly the same amount of time. Like 2 is a factor of 8 out of the 11, and 3 is a factor of 7 out of the 11.
So what does that tell you? Or what does that mean? Like, why is that important?
Well, I mean, if there are recurrences, possibly, I mean, some of these could be due to just a random thing.
Like maybe the 7.
Right, yeah, like that's an outlier. But so 2 or 3, 2 maybe isn't enough, right? Because like A next to each other.
This one?
Well, I guess it would be enough if it was all 2, but
2, 2 or 11, so it's 44. Yeah, so this is kind of the core idea here is rather than just looking at 1, right? Because we can look at this one and we can try to determine it, but this maybe indicates that, okay, the key is one of 3, 30, 15, 10, 5, 10, 6, 5, 3, 2. But among those, we don't really know. But if we assume that this key length the same key length is obviously used for all of these repetitions, and so some of these repetitions are likely due because of the actual plain text and not due to random chance. So therefore, those should have either similar factors or be some multiple of the key length, a factor or a multiple of. Right? So we could maybe think about that and look at, well, what's the most common factors here? Right? So the problem is we have all, and I guess we didn't talk about 1, but we've already kind of ruled out 1 being the key length because we did an analysis and we said it doesn't look like an English distribution. Right? So this is exactly what we look at. We look and we say, a lot of them have 2 in their factors, and a lot also have 3 in their factors. So we tried 2, would we try 2?
I don't know. I just keep going back to the fact that like every even number has 2 as a factor, right? Like, so just because 2 is in everything doesn't mean that it's a good idea. But the fact that 2 and 3 are in everything, that would make me want to pick like 6.
Why?
Because 2 and 3 are both factors of 6. And 6 is, I feel like, a reasonable length to start with because you don't have too many combinations that you'd have to go through. Well, I mean, there's still a lot, but for computers, not that bad.
Yeah, so I think here's the way I think about it, right? So you think about 2, right? So if, let's say, assume the key is 2, then how many of these 3 factors would we expect there to be? Would we expect there to be equally as many? No, because not every even number is not evenly divisible by 3, right? I don't know the exact, I'm not a number theory person, so I don't know these exact numbers, but 6 would be, 9 would not be, 12 would be, 15 would not be, right? So, and similarly with 3, right? If 3 was the key, you wouldn't necessarily expect, not necessarily you'd expect all of these 2s to show up. So then the question exactly becomes, well, it looks like it's indicating 2 times 3, right? So that 2 and 3 are factors of the key. And so if the key is 6, then it actually covers all of these kind of cases. And we would expect 2s and 3s in roughly-ish the same amount. And the tricky part is some of this is due to randomness, right? The 2s and the 3s, so you can't take it hard and fast. And of course, what we're doing here is I know the answer. We are guiding towards the answer, right? You will not know the answer. You don't know if you're going in the right direction. So oftentimes you will guess, and you'll guess wrong. And maybe you'll have to then backtrack to say, okay, let's reevaluate, maybe try a different key size. So what do we do then? How do we check this? Do we just go ahead and try to break it?
Could run it.
Why do we want to check? Why do we want a check?
So you don't have to iterate through all the possibilities.
Yeah, to double check that our intuition, right? So we try to derive the key size from the information that we have based on the factors of the distance between repetitions and the ciphertext. Maybe there's a lot of random, maybe they're choosing really weird words that just happen to be, by chance, have repetitions. So this is kind of a good thing throughout, not only breaking crypto, but all types of security areas, is trying to verify your assumptions. So you make some kind of guess, like you say, okay, I'm gonna guess that the key size is 6. But then how can I verify and try to convince myself that, yeah, that key size actually makes sense without trying to do the full encryption, right? Or full decryption and breaking, because that's kind of an expensive thing. So how would you do that? How would you try to convince yourself that this is a reasonable key size? And this applies in general, right? Not just for us, but.
Do the same statistical analysis we did on the other cipher, breaking it into 6s.
And then do what?
See, and then compare it versus the Wikipedia percentages.
Yes, so we could. So yeah, so we could break the alphabet into 6, right? So every 6th word. Let me see, where do I have this? Yes, so we can break it into every 6th word, and then we can. So we break it into the 6 alphabets, then we could run our, the analysis we already ran on the, where do we have that? Yeah, kind of the frequency analysis to see, or we can try to compare it to the English distribution, so we can do the, yeah, we could try maybe the correlation frequency to see how close it is, or we could try graphing it to see how close that is. Can we use bigrams? 2 letters, 3 letter frequencies? What do you think? because we can do that in the Caesar cipher, right? With the Caesar cipher, we can say, we can not only look at a single letter and say what's the frequency of a single letter, we can look at pairs of letters, like we looked at the LL and hello, or world, right? There are pairs of letters that are kind of likely to occur, and there's a frequency at which they're likely to occur. Yeah?
Once we break it up, since the characters are 6 characters apart, it wouldn't have that binary.
Exactly, the 6th character, exactly, the key breaks it up so that every 6th letter, right? So that really doesn't tell us anything, right? So we don't want to do that. All right, cool. Okay, so what we're going to do is develop a new metric, because actually, so this is, I think, a good reason why. So if we look at, we did the, so here, this is the, we did the frequency analysis of the cipher with the boy has the ball encrypted with a 3-letter key, right? So we did the frequency analysis, we calculated the correlation between this and the English language, and the top ones were 0. Yes, the top ones was very high, and they were actually just as high as the Caesar cipher. I think it's here. Yeah, 0.0539, right? And the actual one was 0.0518. And if we looked in our cipher, these ones actually had really high calculation scores, right? So that actually may not tell us, this is not a good way to tell us whether we're on the right track. We really want a different metric. And so, that works. All right. Cool. Can you all see this? Yeah? Okay, cool. So we still need to use, and we still want to use essentially the distribution of letters in English. But let's say these are 100% random letters. Like we have a 26-sided dice that has all of the letters of the alphabet, and we just keep rolling that dice and putting characters out there, right? So I'm not going to do that. But let's just assume we have some, well, okay. Maybe, you think if I had you guys shout out random, see, but this is even biased because I had to keep my left hand by the shift key while I was hitting numbers, and I alternated left and right sides when I was hitting, so you could probably create a heat map of keys I was likely to press. So it's definitely not random. So so assuming it's completely random, how many Z's would we expect there to be?
1 out of 26.
So, okay, let's rephrase it a different way. Let's say I randomly pick one character from this string. What's the likelihood that it's Z?
Like the length of your string times 1 out of.
Oh, I just changed it so you'd be right.
Or something, I guess, is that it?
So, okay, so let's go back to the original one then. So if I ask you what is the, I see. How many Z's would we expect there to be in here? Would be 1 over 26 times the length of the key, or the length of this ciphertext, right? And spoken another way, what's the likelihood that we grab any random character in here and it's a Z? Would be 1 over 26, right? And that would be true for basically any letter that we could choose, right? The distribution, assuming this is completely random, is 1 over 26 for all characters. Everybody agree? Yeah. What about pulling, and we do know that the statistical analysis of English is not this way, right? But we need some kind of a measure. So another idea would be randomly grab one character in this string. What's the likelihood? I'm actually getting this correct. I'm not a big statistics or crypto person, by the way. No, getting too far. Yeah, okay, good. So, so the idea is if we pull one random letter from the ciphertext, and then we pull another random letter from the ciphertext, what's the likelihood that those are going to be the same? So if it's completely random, what would that be?
1 in 25.
So it'd be 1 over 26, so we grab one letter, so it's a random letter, and then the next one would be 1 over 1 over 26. Is that how I want to phrase that though? There's a problem because we've taken one out of the string, right? We're going to do two things at once. We're going to go forward and backwards. Okay, so what we're going to is a measure called index of coincidence, which is the probability that two randomly chosen letters from the ciphertext are the same. I think what's messing us up is the fact that I created this random string. And so the idea here is that in English, this will follow the distribution, right? So your first randomly chosen character will be from English, and then the odds that you grab that same character are also different. So it's actually a fairly easy calculation. You take the n times n minus, so it's the, I want to draw this. Oh, you guys can't see that. Did you see this before? Yeah, you did. Of course, yes, I wanted to lock the computer. Connection, right. All this divided. Cool. Okay, so the idea is we calculate for all. So fi is just literally the number of times character I occurs in the ciphertext. So it's a very easy calculation. You're literally just counting. So you calculate the number of times that something appears. So in this case, for all characters, so you go A through Z, you calculate how many times do they appear, times how many times they appear minus 1, and then you divide by the size of the string times the size of the string minus 1. And it's based off of so the idea is what's the size of choosing, or what's the, so let's say a specific character Z, so f of, I guess that would be 26, right? Right, so the idea of the percentage, the odds of you choosing character Z are how many times Z occurs in the string divided by n. Right? Simple, that's simple probability. I definitely know that. Right? Take something from the string. Now, what are the odds that you pull another Z from the string? How many Z's are there left in the string?
One less.
There's one less. And how many letters are there left in the string? Like minus 1. Right, so this is the probability of pulling a Z twice from this given string. Right? So now we want to calculate this for all possible characters. Right? So we just sum this. We say I is 0 to 26. We change the 26s to i's, and why can we pull out the n times n minus 1? Because it doesn't depend on the summation variable, right? So it's going to be constant, so that gives us this formula. So then we have summation I goes to 0 to 26 over fi times fi minus 1. All of this divided by n times n minus 1. So this gives us a number for what are the likelihood across all the numbers that when we pick one number, we'll pick that same number again. Sorry, letter again. And what this is nice is that we can pre-calculate this, and there are tables for this, different periods of the key. So in our ciphertext, in that last ciphertext, if you run this calculation, it's 0.043. And, oh, I did not show that. And so, somebody was right, good. So you can calculate this for different key lengths, and you can see it's kind of asymptotically getting closer and closer to 1 over 26, which is 0.038. So you can use this to try to double check that you actually got something that you think is reasonable. And what's very cool is, so it's obviously statistics, we have a smallish sample size, so it's not going to be 100% correct, but the fact that this says slightly more than 5 and we got an answer of 6, that kind of indicates we're probably in the correct ballpark. So we split the ciphertext into 6 different alphabets, and the very cool thing is we can run this same index of coincidence again on that each of these strings. And so what would we expect?
Should the incidence of coincidence be the same, or similar regardless of the size of the string?
Yes, and what would we expect it to be?
Slightly larger than 5. Like 0.466.
What was that?
You expect it to be 0.066 because all of those have a key length of 1. So
Yes,
here it should be 1.
Yes, we would expect it to be 0.066. We'd expect it to be, once we split it correctly, it should be the case that it's 0.066, right? Or close to there. What's maybe a problem with that? How many letters do we have here?
Less than 3.
Not very many, right? I don't actually know the number, but yes, not very many letters here. So our statistics may not be correct because this is calculated off of a large, fairly large sample size. So for our first alphabet, we have 0.069, 0.078, 78, 56, 0.124, and 0.043. So this is good? Are we happy with this or not happy? We go back, start from the drawing board. Try different key length.
Where did these strings come from?
These are the ciphertext, so I can illustrate. Oh, come on. I don't want to do it like this, but sure. All right. Oh, there we go. Okay. This is this is the ciphertext split up into 6 different alphabets. So you take this, you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, it's also how you split teams up evenly, right? You just make everybody count off into numbers, and then you go with the people who have the same number as you. It's exactly the same idea here. So look at that. 9, 6, 1. So, and then you split that up so that every one of these alphabets here is, so this should be exactly A, I, K, H, O, I. These are all A, I, K, H, O, I. Right, so that's every 6th character, and then this one is every 6th character plus 1, and the other one is plus 2. Yeah.
So we're adding letters together for when we're doing the actual thing. Are we adding the, like if we add A to A, would it be, the output be A? Or would
A.
it be
It would be A.
Okay. So we're
That tells you the amount to shift, and we have been defining A to be 0. So A represents no shift. And Z represents -1, or basically the previous character.
So we're adding position in the alphabet.
Yes. So, then should we be happy with these results? Do we press forward in our analysis? What's worrying about this? Yeah.
Like the whole second half.
I don't know if you could say second half, because that implies that there's some relation between all of these, but yes, you definitely, I mean, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th alphabet, right, the 0.124, that's a little bit weird. I mean, it could just be that that has a weird distribution of characters, right, randomly. And you think this is only, what, about 30 characters drawn from there? No. The nice things are the first couple are fairly high indices of coincidence, so this is more in line with what we would expect for a key of 1.
Well, our central assumption is kind of flawed in the sense that we've built all this based on the assumption that English letters occur at the same frequency in actual English sentences.
Yes.
So some deviation from that might be, like if one of those words on there happened to be xylophone, like that would be, or maybe that's not right, but like hello has 2 L's instead, so those are different.
Yeah. No, exactly, and this is part of the thing. And it's not, it's, for something like this, it's not a lot of letters, right? So basically how I would approach this is say, well, it's a decent, we're at least where we think we are on a majority of them, about 3 or 4. And the other ones are not quite what we would expect, but maybe that's just due to noise, so let's proceed forward but cautiously. And so we know if we have to revert back, we always can, right? And we'll keep this in mind that, randomness, whatever, I mean, it's all kinds of things. The words that are being used, all of that. So, and we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday, is how to break this is we then now have Caesar ciphers for every single alphabet. So we have 6 alphabets now, and they each are encoded with a different Caesar cipher. And so but we talked about also that one of the difficulties is a Caesar cipher, when we're breaking it, we'll know we get it correct because we will see English text appear, right? But here we may not know when we get it correct because each of these are dependent, right? You're breaking every 6th character, so it's hard to actually know whether you've broken one correctly. But what is the benefit that we do have? I can't remember if we talked about this on Tuesday, so somebody could just say it and then we'll go on. Different maybe from a Caesar cipher. So each of these 6 alphabets are independent, but they're also not independent. How is that helpful? Yeah.
So if you found a combination of 6 Caesar cipher keys that when you applied them to each of those 6 strings, the resulting distribution of characters modeled the English language
why the third or fourth?
Well, it's most likely to be the second letter, and then like less likely to be the third, and then like could have like diphthongs or whatever.
And you're basing that off of the first letter, basically, or first word. You're assuming that there's like a first word in this.
That's the only one that you know.
Right. And so let's say you do that, and let's say you're fairly confident about 2 out of the 3 alphabets. How do you proceed from there? All right, think about that. So one thing we can do, we can actually do for this a really simple type of statistical analysis. So rather than trying to, and actually, so what I like about this is these techniques also can apply to a Caesar cipher. So the idea is rather than compare it necessarily to this very fine-grained distribution of English letters, you kind of bucketize each letter into high, medium, or low frequency. And then you calculate that for your string and calculate that for English language, and that may tell you kind of how to shift them, and it may give some clues. So let's try that. So we can, yeah, so I can calculate, so here's the letter frequency, A through Z, of all of the characters in alphabet A, all the characters in alphabet B, and the rest. And in English, we have this kind of a rough distribution where you have A is high, E is high. What is this? I actually don't know if this lines up correctly. The lows, you have a string of low letters at the end. So what? I don't know. What does this tell you? Do any of them like have a very clear way we should shift them or not shift them, or? Yeah.
Number 1's looking pretty close to what we want. The A, the E, and the string of zeros.
The A, the E, zeros at the end. Even the M, I believe that's here. Yeah. Oh, the T. I see the T is high. The U is medium. Yeah, so actually one kind of looks like it may, the key there may be A. Right? So it may not actually be shifted at all. Any of the other ones? Yeah, sorry.
If you just look at the zeros, you can see like on 3, the zeros start around C and they go for that whole length. So they're probably the last letters. So I mean, all of them have groups of zeros and probably the same like in the last letters.
Yeah, so definitely, so if you look, I mean, it's very clear on 1, right? There's only this kind of big string of zeros here at the end, which is fairly similar to what we would expect. 3, I would say, wait, you said which one? 4?
3 and then on C, it looks like there's a bunch of zeros.
Right, here zeros. The question though is, but you have the 2 here, so if you shift so if you shifted this all the way to the right, if you shifted this all the way to the right, the 2 would be in the A spot, and then you have B, C, D, E, actually, which does fit pretty well with 4 there. And then F, G, H, I, yes, I would say that would be a safe shift to try. Right, shifting this, I don't know how many that is, but yeah, shift it, what's it, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way there. But what about 4? Does that same logic apply to 4?
Also, if that is lining up, assuming it's lining up correctly, column-wise, string 3 has 4 Qs and 3 Us. And we, am I seeing that right? Or no, it has, I think that's
4,
the T.
3. Oh yeah.
I thought I saw 4 and 3, and I was going to say QU generally goes next to it, but now I think 3 is under T.
But would you, so think about that though, would you expect Q and the U to be in the same alphabet here?
Oh no, because these are split up.
Exactly. So let's go back with 4, right? So I guess the problem, at least I see with 4, is we don't necessarily, even this is more zeros, but this is still 4, and this is what? 6. So it's hard to say which one is necessarily should go there. We also, don't, it could be similarly-ish here. Yeah, so, cool. So this, let's see. Yes, perfect. Okay, so yeah, so so we just did this. I actually didn't look ahead, so I don't really know where this goes. So yeah, so we said the first one is likely not shifted at all. The third one, it's likely we said that I should go to A, right? So this should be shifted kind of back, all of that. And let's see. Yeah, I mean, it's not quite as clear as necessarily. Yeah, I mean, you could kind of use that same argument here on alphabet 6, right? Where we have 6 zeros, but the only other place we have zeros are not in a large area like this. So maybe we could try shifting. If that was true, this V would go to A, and we would shift it. I think it's 6 characters to the right. So we can try this. And the important point, and what we want to do is we want to keep track of our guesses, right? Shift all the alphabets, and then put them back in the ciphertext. So why do we want to do this?
You don't know what works until.
Oh, you guys can't see that.
Because you don't know what works until you get them all together.
And now what can we start doing at this point?
Crossword puzzle.
Yeah, pretty much, right? I mean, it's or I think of like a Wheel of Fortune, right? You're like, but it's easier in some sense because there are letters you don't know, but they are all linked, right? So you can try shifting one letter to what you think it would be, and that shifts that entire alphabet a certain amount, and so you can try that out. So this is what I was going to, in that, yes, all of the alphabets are all 6 independent things, but they're not actually independent because on here, this is some kind of English text, and the letters from each of the alphabets are related. So then we have to do cool things and look for clues. So this is where it gets tricky, and this is why this is annoying that we already know the answer, so we can't just try random stuff. Maybe next time of course next time is when it's not helpful for you, but maybe I'll have this up so that we can actually do the decryption together. So the idea now, though, is now if we assume that the bold letters are probably correct, right, we can try to use our knowledge of English to try to come up with some way of thinking about these. And so the cheating way going forward is basically thinking we can look for, we talked about this, common like 2 or 3 three-letter words. So if we saw anywhere in here like a T, a something, and an E, we would probably try the, right? Like it's an incredibly common 3-letter word. We can also maybe look for something that's like an A, something, and an E. That could be what words? R, A-R-E? Sure, so let's try that randomly. Does that make sense? Does that look better? Why? So this is the thing, right? You're trying to testing things, right? You're making a change and you're seeing how that changes the cipher, the decrypted ciphertext, but you always want to check and make sure, did you actually make progress, or is it just still random? So is this a good substitution, or should we go back? Go back. Why?
Everything except for R is still gibberish.
Everything except the R? Is that true? What was that?
There's pace up in there. There's Rick.
Pace, Rick, what else? But, which is a very common word. Maybe the other one? Part of this is tricky because we don't have spaces, right? So, you know, spaces could be thrown anywhere in here. I would say that the fact that this decrypted to but is probably good.
None.
None, where?
The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th row, end of the second column.
Oh, none? Yeah, the fact that that's a word, that would also be a pretty good sign, right? That it looks like we're getting closer. Any other suggestions, things to try? Sounds kind of like a puzzle, right? We're trying to fit a piece into the puzzle based on what we already think we know about it. And it is probably easier, I guess, if you're actually doing this, to delete or gray out the ciphertext, because I'm trying to do this, and it's a little tricky just having the bold.
Maybe try P to D.
Where? So we have two more alphabets.
Sorry, on the, well, I'm looking at the GOO.
Where?
Wait, down to the right a little bit. EGOO is the start of it, yeah. So I'm looking at the GOO thinking that might be good.
You could even go in front of that. You could have a but R good.
Yeah.
But R, good. So does that actually work? So if A goes to F, so reverse that. Is that the same key? So like actually do that, because I'm gonna do it. Yeah. What's the shift there? Those would be F, so that'd be 5. F, G, H, I. Yeah, it's not the same.
How be good instead of are good?
But which one?
You were trying are good, how about be good? Be good?
The, T-H-E?
Yeah.
Okay, so does that work?
That works better.
Yeah. So that would be F, T goes to F, so how would that shift this character? Alright, yeah. We can actually try that. That may, I won't do it right now, but so we talked about using the first word. Maybe there's something we can learn about the first word. We also know that the last thing on here is some kind of a word, right? Which means that the very last letter here must be some kind of ending. So is there any common ending that ends with M-I-C-A and then a letter?
Jamaica.
Huh?
Jamaica.
I-C-A-N? So it could end in N. What are some other possibilities?
H if it's a name. Micah.
Micah could be an H with a name.
the apostrophe in America before or after?
Wait, what?
Says the
Usually
apostrophe in America
usually in these
before.
things we have no apostrophes, so it's not going to be an apostrophe. So how could you figure this out?
Could be an L.
Could be an LY.
Well, if you have R, after R, you could have comical.
So mickle as like an ending. So
So
you,
you'd have to use the OC before it, comical, C-O-M-I-C-A-L.
right, right. But I'm just focusing on the last part here. Yeah.
I mean, if you go back up to the FB that we were talking about,
Yeah.
if you turn that up to a TH, right above it, it turns into that, it's two.
Interesting.
But if you do, it makes two words, but changing FB to TH.
So you change FV back to the, as we were talking about, and then that would change this. What was it? So paste.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's-
that.
Mm.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. Actually, and if we did that, we'd find out that by changing that F to T, that would change this X to L, and it would also change this O to C. So we would know that we were on the right track. Apparently, I had no idea that this was a thing, like that Mikal is a common ending for an adjective. I guess if you're a crypto person, you would know this more, but yeah, so you could do this. You could actually, that TH is a much better way of doing this. So we'd see that TVE, and at this point, what's going on? At this point, we could even brute, we could brute force it, or we could very clearly see what it is. And another thing that we can use, so if the other good thing we can use about English that we touched on earlier, right? And these are all not techniques to necessarily break this one, because we just did, but in general to approach these, right? We have Q something I, so we'd assume that the I goes to what? U, right? And then we'd try that, so that would be another thing to try. Yeah?
There's two more Mickles if you change the
There's two more Mickles where, oh, here? Yeah, yeah. And you could look in here and see, does this O change to A, and is that the same there? So yeah, so we would do that, and we would get our awesome ciphertext, or clear text. And you can see it's weird, it's not like a normal, these aren't like normal words, right? So it kind of makes sense that some of those distributions were weird. You can look this up later, it's not anything fancy. Doesn't really matter. The fact is we got it, that's the only thing that matters. Okay, cool. So this was basically, we looked at multiple different types of substitution ciphers, where the basic idea is we substitute one value in for another. Oh, the other thing I was going to say was that I did look up the Enigma machines. Apparently they were super cool in that, so they were like changing substitution ciphers. So basically when you hit, so the way it worked was there would be like a certain number of rollers, and there were all different versions of Enigma machines. So each roller had 26 sides on it, each one to a letter. And so you would type, let's say A, and that A would cause one of the rollers to output like the letter that was being output, but by pressing A, that would also cause all the rollers to shift based on how they were wired internally. And so that means the next time you hit A, it wouldn't map to Z or whatever it did before, it would map to something else. So yeah, super interesting stuff in there. That could be a really interesting homework assignment, so I want to talk about that. So the idea here is, so now that we looked at, so we can do substitutions, right? So basically substitute one letter in for another. Another way we can go about trying to do ciphers would be to maybe rearrange the letters and scramble the letters. Is this better or worse? So what's the benefit of doing this?
If someone's looking for one of the other types of ciphers, they'll be be unfruitful.
Yeah, so what'll be so we could tell easily a Caesar cipher because it doesn't follow the standard distribution of letters in English. But if we run that on ciphertext that's been moved around, then what's my train of thought? So if we move around all the letters, then how does that affect the letter frequency of the plaintext, of the ciphertext? Same, it doesn't change it at all, right? It just moves the letters around. So it has the benefit where you can't do, let's say, 1 gram analysis to try, because the distribution will be exactly the same as the plaintext. But what else is it going to destroy and change?
It's not going to change how often letters appear.
It's not going to change. So it's not going to change how often single letters appear. Well, what is it going to change? Where they are. So that letters that follow each other are now likely to not follow each other, right? So 2-3 gram frequencies will be changed. So we can actually test for this, and we can see if the index of coincidence is around 0.066, then that indicates, and the distribution of letters is what we would think in English. We'd think it's probably a transposition cipher, and they're just moving stuff around. So the kind of the simplest transposition cipher you can think of, simply break the message into some blocks of the key length size, and the key is how you transpose the blocks. So the key would be here. Okay, something is kind of automated. So the idea, if your key is length 4, right? So you break the ciphertext up into blocks of 4, and then the key tells you how to move the blocks. So it means of each block, the 0th character is mapped to the 3rd character. The first character is mapped to the 0th character. The second character is mapped to the second character, and the 3rd character is mapped to the first character. Right? And that's how you're going to mix it. So, why does it keep doing this? This is going to drive me crazy. So if the message is ASU is awesome, and this is the key, what's the first block going to be? I'm just going to destroy the computer. What's going to happen? And actually, we're just, this is going to be better. And it was what? 3021. So then what's the ciphertext? So which is going to be the 0th character of this block? S. So this, the second character, this means the second character gets mapped to the 0th character, the cipher. So then what's the next one? Is it A, E, W, S, O, E, and S? Okay, so then how do we break this? Slides are dead to us now. So how would we try to go about attacking this?
something this small, you could just try to create one word and then see if that pattern change would work for other words within. Like,
So try to do what?
create one word, common word, like in this you could do some, or some is probably the easiest, most common word that you can.
Yeah, so it's a little bit trickier, right? Because we can do this because there just happened to be a word that was exactly the key length, right? And so maybe we could try moving it around. I don't know, maybe it's possible in English it was this, or
Very less common.
probably, yes. Yeah.
Assuming we had to break it, we know the key length. We're going to have to determine get the key length first.
Yeah, you have to determine the key length. You have to, let's say we do know the key length. So then the question is, how do you break it from there? So what's the first simplest thing we should try? Yeah. Brute force it. Yes, just try everything. Try everything. Right? Actually, so how many? So for a key size of length 2, how many combinations are there? 1. Well, 2, I guess, but 1 doesn't encrypt anything. The other one just swaps. What about 3?
Is it factorial? Is that what must be doing?
It is factorial. Yeah, so if we have the key length key, then the number of possible combinations is k factorial, which is nice from a defensive perspective, which means we don't have to have a large key in order to get to very, very, very large numbers, right? So that's why, like, if it's about roughly, I mean, 13 would be about, what is it, 6 trillion, which is kind of a lot of combinations to try. But anything less than that is probably something that you could brute force on a modern machine, even like a laptop, pretty easily. Do this is to try to analyze, so we know that the single letter frequency is then kept, but we also know that the bigram frequency, so what characters follow each other. So given, if you have character A, what character likely follows A most of the time? Or for instance, like we saw with Q, right? If we know that there's a Q in there, we know there's likely a U that has to follow that. So we could use that. So we could use the bigram and even trigram. So we could use the 3 letters that are likely to follow each other. And that would probably incorporate our knowledge essentially of THE and ARE and these kind of things. The rails fence cipher. So this is actually a cipher that was used, I believe, by the Greeks, I want to say, but I should look that up before I make that claim, so don't write that down. The idea is, if you think about like the fences, you want to put the ciphertext, well, it's here. So if the ciphertext is hello world, we would do something like HELLOWRLD, and then we would read it left to right. So we do HLOOLELWRD. So this would be our ciphertext. So what's the key? Yes, the height of the rail, right? The shape and structure that I'm writing these things on. You could get more, you could get this fancy, you can have like a shape that kind of looks more like this, and you could do something like, I don't know, HELLOW. This is one problem I can't draw straight. RLD, and then you could read this left to right, top to bottom. So the ciphertext would read HOLEL WRDLO. That's weird. right? And so the key would then be knowing how to place these letters back on the rails so that you could get the correct ciphertext. And the way this worked on the ancient devices was you would get some kind of cylinder device, and you would take basically a strip of paper, wrap that strip of paper around the cylinder, write your message, I believe, no, that doesn't make sense, top to bottom. And then when you take this piece of paper off the cylinder, right, because each of these pieces, letters is going to come at a different interval, right, along the path. So when you take it off, all these letters will look all jumbled up and mixed up, and the only way to do it is to have a device that has the exact same diameter of the original device. And then you just take the thing, you put it on there, and then the message magically appears. But it's the same idea here. And we spent a lot of time breaking the other stuff, so we're not going to go into too much detail here. So yeah, you look, and so we talked about how to detect this, and we just talked about this, right? So you look and say, well, one-letter frequencies follow English, but the bigrams and trigrams do not, so it's likely some kind of transposition. And do is when we want to try to break this, we try to look at the ciphertext and say, okay, what is the most likely bigram? So let's say we choose H, and we'd say, okay, what's more likely that O follows H, L follows H, E follows H, L follows H, W follows H, R follows H, D follows H. So we try to think what's more likely of one character following another character, and then try rearranging that. And we try that on the rails, and we try different possible combinations of rails. So going off the other one, we could see that if we look at the frequencies in English of bigrams that start with D, start with H, we would see that HE is the most likely, where HO occurs much, much, much less frequently. And the other ones occur almost never. So you would then think, and we could think of, so you also want to look at 2 grams that end with H, because maybe H is at the end, so it doesn't make sense to think of what comes after it. And so here we'd see that almost nothing ends with H, so it's probably safe to say that E follows H. And then we could arrange them so they're adjacent, start writing it, and then we could read off our plain text.